Welcome to the final debate, and this is a big showdown. For those of you who weren't here for the other debates, you certainly missed some really great performances from our young people. They did an excellent job, and I'd like for us to give all the young people that participated in the high school debates over a period of time a round of applause. I concur with Teacher Connie in her saying that we are quick to paint a negative picture of our young people, but slow to encourage them and to be present when they're doing positive things. And I think as a community, we definitely need to change that. I wouldn't take any more of your time. I'd like to get right into it. The mood for this debate is, as you heard, the changing global economic landscape will negatively impact financial services in the Virgin Islands. For the proposition, we have Team Brigada Flax Educational Center. First speaker, Ms. Anika Christopher. Give her a round of applause, please. Second speaker, Ms. Kia Hodge. Give her a round of applause. For the opposition, we have Team Elmore Stout High School. First speaker, Kimia Millington. Second speaker, Jada Angus. And now let's get to the debate. I now call on the proposition's first speaker, Ms. Anika Christopher, to present his case.
Pablo Neruda, a Chilean poet who won the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature in 1971 said, and I quote, "You can cut all the flowers, but you cannot keep spring from coming," end of quote. What this means is that certain things are beyond human control and are going to happen regardless of what you, I, or anyone else does. Mr. Moderator, learned judges, my worthy opponents, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My colleague and I fully support the mood that the changing global economic landscape will negatively impact financial services in the Virgin Islands. In preparation for this debate, we invited guest speakers from the Financial Services Commission to our school, and we read a number of books and articles. Some articles appeared in a magazine entitled Business BVI. Some were transcripts of speeches delivered by Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Services Commission, Mr. Robert Mathavius, and other articles were published on online newspapers. We also read portions of the book, Financial Services Demystified, written by Ms. Ayana Hull, and Offshore Financial Services, a BVI text, by Paul Biles. Consequently, our thorough research has led us to the conclusion that the changing global economic landscape will negatively impact financial services in the Virgin Islands. Mr. Moderator, for the purpose of this presentation, please allow me to define a few key terms. The global economic landscape, simply put, refers to the world economy. Merriam-Webster defines the word changing as making or becoming different, and negative as features that hinder or oppose constructive development. Oxford Dictionary defines impact as having a marked effect or influence. Also, on its webpage, we read that the BVI Financial Services Commission, which I will refer to as the BVI FSC, is the territory's single financial services regulator responsible for authorizing, licensing, and monitoring companies operating in or from within the BVI. The mood as it is says that the changes taking place in the world economy will have a marked negative effect on the financial services in the Virgin Islands. I will expand 3 points. 1, rising international pressure, competition, and other factors have resulted in a decline in new incorporations in recent years. 2, the BVI FSC is challenged in the area of responsiveness and its capacity to deliver in a timely manner. 3, it is costly for the BVI FSC to design and implement new financial regulation for the financial services sector and enforce these regulations. Firstly, although for many years the Virgin Islands has been a leader in company incorporations and has had one of the largest registries of companies globally, rising international pressure, competition, and other factors have resulted in a decline in new incorporations in recent years. One reason may be that financial institutions which moved into the Virgin Islands initially were attracted to the BVI's regulatory laws to finance capital, as previously the BVI, as an offshore finance center, did not impose overly strict regulation for newcomers. This has changed. The regulatory environment is more demanding in terms of the number of cross-cutting initiatives being undertaken simultaneously and the details of what is demanded of us. Secondly, the BVI FSC is challenged in the area of responsiveness and its capacity to deliver in a timely manner. Mr. Moderator, according to Mr. Mathavius, in his speech entitled "The Urgency of Now," delivered on May 28, 2014, the Virgin Islands has been painted in a bad light overseas because of the difficulties experienced by our International Tax Authority in responding to international requests following the tardiness, indifference, and inertia of those from whom information was sought. In a speech entitled "Can They Live Happily Ever After?" delivered in November 2014 to a gathering of regional compliance officers, Mr. Mathavius confesses that here in the Virgin Islands, as in a number of other jurisdictions, there seems to be some disconnect between company directors and the compliance officers they employ. He says, and I quote, "In my own territory, we find that compliance officers' annual reports may simply not match what is uncovered during the inspection." End of quote. Mr. Mathavius explains that compliance is quite simply pivotal to the success of financial services firms. If a business wants to survive and thrive, it needs to be actively compliant, not wait for a kick from the regulator. End of quote. Without compliance, there is no control of risk, whether they are regulatory, reputational, or due to liability, negligence, or finance. Without proper compliance, the organization is more susceptible to legal and regulatory sanctions, financial loss, and reputational damage. Mr. Mathavius went on to explain that sadly, whether through ignorance, inertia, incompetency, indifference, or ineptitude, the compliance culture in a number of organizations in the Virgin Islands is not exactly where it should be. Ladies and gentlemen, the recent loss of registered companies in the Virgin Islands seems to suggest that many compliance officers and company regulators are still not taking their role seriously. If this attitude continues or worsens, tell me, will not financial services in the Virgin Islands be negatively impacted? Thirdly, it is costly for the BVI FSC to design and implement new financial regulation for the financial services sector and its enforcement. Mr. Moderator, can the BVI withstand the cost of new initiatives, which would include tighter anti-money laundering regulation procedures, documenting the changes, preparing new legislation, and setting up a financial intelligence unit? Extending the capacity of the Virgin Islands regulatory body requires internationally competent, experienced, and expensive regulators here in the Virgin Islands. However, in some jurisdictions, some private sector offshore finance firms lure talented individuals away from the FSC, offering higher salaries and perks. Thus, the FSC departments struggle to fill vacancies and lose staff, whom they have trained at public cost, to offshore finance firms. Mr. Moderator, if the BVI FSC lacks competent and experienced skilled personnel, or even the structures to keep up with the rapid, complex, constant change of various OECD/IMF initiatives, there is no doubt that the global economic landscape is already negatively affecting financial services. Mr. Moderator, I have outlined 3 reasons why the changing global economic landscape will negatively impact financial services in the Virgin Islands. They were: 1, rising international pressure, competition, and other factors have resulted in a decline in new incorporations in recent years. 2, the BVI FSC is challenged in the area of responsiveness and its capacity to deliver in a timely manner. 3, it is costly for the BVI FSC to design and implement new financial regulations for the financial services sector and enforce these regulations. Ladies and gentlemen, these are challenging times for financial services in the Virgin Islands. We can cut all the flowers, but we cannot keep spring from coming. The changing global economic landscape will negatively impact financial services in the Virgin Islands. Thank you.
I cannot change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to always reach my destination. Honored officials, lawn moderator, esteemed audience, and colleagues, good evening. In December of 2011, Honorable Myron Walwyn, Minister of Education in the Virgin Islands, issued a challenge. He challenged the people of the Virgin Islands to pen a territorial song that would embody who we are as a people. The result was a song that we used to express our Virgin Islands pride. Oh, beautiful Virgin Islands. This song maps our historical adversities, lauds our ability to plan and adapt, and celebrates our successes, both present and future. Moderator, listening to our territorial song this evening has deepened our resolution as we reject the idea that the changing global economic landscape will negatively impact financial services in the Virgin Islands. A discourse is most productive when terminology is agreed upon. Thus, I will define the key terms of the moot. Changing, according to the Merriam-Webster, is the continuous tense of the verb change. It means different and shifting. Economic landscape is an abstract term that was crafted to classify a vast and rapidly evolving financial environment, which includes but is not limited to commodities, industry, resources, human and otherwise, and banking. Will, according to my grammar textbook, is a simple future tense verb that expresses inevitability. Will is a much stronger verb than can, could, or may. Negatively, according to Merriam-Webster, is an adverb that means unwarranted or harmful. Financial services, as itemized on the BVI Financial Services Commission website, includes insurance, banking, trustee business, company management, mutual funds business, as well as the registration of companies, limited partnerships, intellectual properties, and ships. The Virgin Islands can simply be defined as our home. Thus, the opposition stance is that the shifting worldwide financial environment will not inevitably lead to harmful consequences for the sector of our industry, which focuses on insurance, banking, trustee business, company management, mutual funds business, and the registration of companies, limited partnerships, intellectual properties, and ships. Wow, that was a mouthful. I think we need to simplify a bit. As the opposition, we will show you, moderator, that the changing winds of the global economies will not necessarily be harmful to our financial services. I will establish the role of financial services in the Virgin Islands economy and outline some of the changes that are occurring in the global economic landscape. I will also show how the Virgin Islands has or will adapt to those changes so that the impacts are minimal or even beneficial. My most erudite seconder will give a sociological context to this discourse. She will show that the Virgin Islands has a history of being buffeted by the winds of change and tacking its sails to use those same winds to its advantage. In 1867, Benjamin Disraeli said, "Change is constant, change is inevitable." The construction of the road presupposes that a shifting global economic landscape is a written phenomenon, that in some idyllic past, the worldwide economic environment was stable. Ridiculous. Way back in 2004, Sergio Snorka, senior economist of the World Bank, in his paper, The Benefits and Risks of Financial Globalization, wrote, and I quote, "From a historical perspective, financial globalization is not a phenomenon," end quote. When analyzing the global economic landscape, he examined international market imperfections, such as hoarding, panics, boom-bust cycles, and the fluctuating nature of capital flows, which can lead to crisis, and concluded that, and I quote, "the net benefit of financial globalization for developing countries can be large." The industry commenced in the BVI in the 1980s. The British Virgin Islands is now one of the world's leading offshore financial centers and boasts one of the highest incomes per capita in the Caribbean. According to Paul Biles, author of Offshore Financial Services, a BVI text published in 2014, as an offshore financial center, we have a relatively large number of financial institutions engaged in business with non-residents. We have a financial system with external assets and liabilities, and we provide low taxation, moderate regulation, and a level of financial privacy for all non-resident clients. The tiny Virgin Islands has approximately 400,000 international business companies, over 300 insurance companies, and over 2,000 mutual funds. Since the passing of IBC in 2004, an average of 5,000 companies are incorporated monthly. BVI's financial services sector, a sophisticated and well-oiled financial management service industry with assets totaling $615 billion, makes up a major share of our economy and consistently provides more than 60% of government revenues. Additionally, our minute territory is an established leading global financial center. Let us look around the globe for evidence of the shifting economic climate. In 2001, Argentina had descended into an economic hole, and it was believed that it would take decades to recover. The country had defaulted on its vast foreign debt, the national currency was devalued, and banks closed their doors to the public. Close to half the population fell below the poverty line as a series of 5 presidents replaced each other in rapid succession. Yet, 7 years later, Argentina's economy is flourishing. A new entrepreneurial spirit has made it competitive in vibrant areas such as software, design, scientific research, and agriculture. That's what I call making lemons when life hands you lemonade. That's what I call making lemonade when life hands you lemons. Bahamas, one of our main competitors in the industry of offshore financial banking, declined in popularity due to reputational damage and damage caused by accusation of inadequate controls on money laundering and allegations of unfair tax competition. But in 2014, the Bahamas ranked 7th out of 29 countries in Central and South America. What a bounce back. With a population of 382,000, the Bahamas still managed to rank in the top 10, ensuring that the world knew that that was just a minor setback for a major comeback. Our territory's population is a mere 32,000. Who says we can't bounce back as well? Despite global pressures, we remain an attractive offshore financial center because we are a politically stable British overseas territory. We have a growth-oriented local government. We have an English legal system. We have a formally codified modern banking, company, and trust laws. And we enact legislative exemptions for qualified institutions. And most importantly, we have earned, through sweat and tears, international recognition and respect. Moderator, the opposition is not fatalistic. We could not in good conscience claim that we see a dismal future for the Virgin Islands simply because the world economy is changing. To combat money laundering and terrorist financing, we joined the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, ensuring that the BVI maintains its reputation. We did lose a few businesses who could not or did not appreciate our heightened vigilance, but those who remain are the best in class. Our reputation still shines. Moderator, change is inevitable, but growth is optional. The Virgin Islands opts for growth. We are so fortunate to live in a territory that does not see global changes approaching, wrap its head in sackcloth and bow. We view global economic changes as an inspiration to assess functionality, fine-tune our reputation as a leading IFC, and balance adherence to regulation with quality service. The Virgin Islands sees the changing worldwide financial landscape as one more challenge to conquer. It is not inevitable. The changing global economic landscape does not have to negatively impact financial services in the Virgin Islands unless we sit back and let it. And we won't.
Who Moved My Cheese is a story of little people and mice running through a maze that represents life, dealing with changes, walking through strife. If you think life does not change, you better think twice. This is an excerpt from the book Who Moved My Cheese, written by Spencer Johnson. Mr. Moderator, learned judges, my worthy opponents, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The story, in a summary, is about mice running through a maze in order to reach the cheese. It is a metaphor about control. The cheese represents our finances, and the maze represents life challenges that make obtaining the finances difficult. When asked about the challenges in today's landscape for building international business relationships, Ms. Elise Donovan, director of BVI House Asia in January 2014, replied, "The challenges are linked to economic downturns, increased global regulatory measures, reputational issues, demands for increased tax revenues, and more transparency." Mr. Moderator, the changing global economic landscape will negatively impact financial services in the Virgin Islands. This evening, I will expand on two more ways in which the impact will be evident. One, financial services will suffer from declining revenues and loss of confidence due to blacklisting. Two, there will be a downsizing of operations and outsourcing of work to other jurisdictions. Mr. Moderator, in a January 2014 issue of BVI News Online, it was stated that the BVI had experienced a notable decline in the incorporation of companies. Following the territory's alleged involvement in the leak of the sensitive financial services information, Premier and Minister of Finance, Dr. D. Orlando Smith, alluded to those factors during his budget address in the territory's parliament, where he disclosed that incorporation fell by 15% up to the end of third quarter in 2013. According to the Financial Times of 2015, Francis has stepped up its assault on tax havens by blacklisting Bermuda, Virgin Islands, and Jersey. This means that the Virgin Islands has been added to a list of non-cooperative jurisdictions. Mr. Moderator, when a country is blacklisted, compliant countries do not want to risk tarnishing their reputation and possible sanctioning by engaging in activities with blacklisted or non-compliant countries. In the financial services industry, compliance refers to adherence to the regulations, policies, and guidelines that apply to financial institutions. Mr. Moderator, in non-compliant jurisdictions, the result for some taxpayers could be disastrous, as blacklisting imposes 75% withholding taxes against investors with assets in the jurisdiction concerned. Beyond the fines, enforcement action also delivers a detrimental blow to the reputation of a financial institution. Loss of client confidence, loss of business, downsizing of operations, and possible extinction are all logical and likely consequences of a tarnished reputation. The obvious aim is to serve as a warning to clients and as an example and deterrent to other institutions. Mr. Moderator, currently, the Virgin Islands is on Francis' blacklist. Given the situation, of the Virgin Islands being on France's blacklist, would you not agree that the changing global economic landscape is affecting financial services in the Virgin Islands? My second point is that the downsizing of operation will occur. In October 2013, Virgin Islands News Online reported that CIBC First Caribbean sent a letter to its employees across the Caribbean dated September 30th, 2013, telling workers that in order to deal with the challenges allegedly generated by the global recession, which began in 2008, they intended to start to downsize their operations. When some of the affected workers were reached for comments, they said, and I quote, "Our families would be affected, our communities would be affected," end of quote. Several companies in the Virgin Islands also undertook cost-cutting initiatives, which included laying off of the employees. One company named TMF, with its headquarters in London, England, reported that the company had not only downsized, but had also allegedly outsourced some of the jobs to Sri Lanka. Mr. Moderator, will you not agree with me that the changing global economic landscape is affecting financial services in the Virgin Islands? Ladies and gentlemen, my colleague and I explained 5 ways in which financial services in the Virgin Islands has been negatively impacted by changing the global economic landscape. We will be burying our heads in the sand if we ignore the fact. I will now conclude by reiterating my 2 reasons why the changing global economic landscape will affect financial services in the Virgin Islands. They are: 1, financial services will suffer from declining revenues and loss of client confidence due to blacklisting. 2, there will be a downsizing of operations and outsourcing of work to other jurisdictions. I rest my case. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
The headlines abound with optimism. September 3rd, 2014, the BVI IFC receives 2014 Offshore Excellence Award in Estate Planning. February 10th, 2015, more than 200 applicants for 50 spaces at the cruise ship Pair project. February 13th, 2015, the British Virgin Islands draws in corporate business from afar. From the heights of Sage Mountain to the shores of White Bay, from the shallows of Anegada to the boulders of Spring Bay, hope and optimism emerge. The Virgin Islands knows that the global economic landscape will be forever changing, and the Virgin Islands knows that it must continue to adapt and grow. Those changes can negatively impact our financial services. They may negatively impact us. They could negatively affect us, but they don't have to. It is not inevitable. My most eloquent first speaker has outlined the importance of financial services in the Virgin Islands. She has shown us how our relatively small size and population are actually a benefit when it comes to adapting to global changes. She has illustrated real-life examples of how global economic pressures have benefited us. The whole world has seen our proactive and reactive stances that have demonstrated the resilience and innovative thinking that is incubated here in the Virgin Islands. Moderator, I will now highlight how the Virgin Islands is built for the challenge of global fluctuations. I will show that the Virgin Islands has an established history that epitomizes the proverb, "When life gives you limes, make limeade." Allow me to create a metaphor to illustrate. The Virgin Islands, 59 square miles and counting, with its population of 32,000, is a lightweight boxer. It is swift-footed. The global economy jabs, and the Virgin Islands stocks. We are required to register all nonprofit organizations. The BVI swiftly comprise, our reputation intact. The G7 nations uppercuts us with more stringent requirements, and we end up on the blacklist, but swiftly regroup and respond. The worldwide economy throws a roundhouse, and the Virgin Islands countered with a rapid block. At the conclusion of this round, the larger, slower global economic landscape has not decimated the Virgin Islands. Instead, we learn, adapt, and improve our approach for future rounds. Moderator, please indulge me as we take a stroll through VI history.
On August 1st, 1834, there was a big change in the Virgin Islands. Slavery was abolished, but this was a bittersweet moment for the BVI. Yes, BVI landers were finally free, but slavery was all they knew. Who would tell them what to do and how to act? They had to eke out an existence in this challenging terrain. The ending of slavery may have seemed to have an immediate negative impact, but in the long run, it is obvious that it was beneficial. They were strong and resilient. Our history makes us who we are. Today, the Virgin Islands is still home to that self-determination and pride. In October 2013, BVInews.com announced, UK government praises strength of Financial Services Commission. MP Mark Simmons called the BVI FSC extremely impressive with the highest possible international reputation. October of 2014, MP James Doddridge, Minister for UK Overseas Territories, visited the Virgin Islands. As reported by the Island Sun, he lauded the territory's strides in financial services and tourism, mentioning the cruise ship pair project and his support for our financial services industry. Author Paul Biles, a former regulator with extensive industry experience in the Cayman Islands, concludes that the Virgin Islands is a serious player in the offshore financial milieu. He recognizes while global economies may fluctuate, if IFCs strike a balance between regulatory and commercial concerns, they will survive, and dare I say, thrive, as they venture into the new global economic landscape. The 2014 Offshore Incorporations Limited report notes that the demand for offshore structures remains robust. Most investors do not let political attacks and bad press get in the way of their practical wealth management and other needs. New incorporations in the BVI, Caymans, Seychelles, Samoa, and Jersey were projected to rise exponentially. Moderator, we must confess that the opposition feels just a bit sorry for our colleagues on the other side of the stage. Unfortunately, the wording of this moot has them boxed in. They have to prove without a reasonable doubt that the changing economic landscape will absolutely and most certainly negatively impact financial services in the Virgin Islands. I don't think they have a crystal ball. The future is not predetermined, and yet the proposition is expected to convince the audience that it is. They would have to convince our listeners to throw out all historical precedents that demonstrates the Virgin Islands pattern of overcoming adversity. They would have to encourage our audience to discard their knowledge of the strength of our IFC, our ideal legal system, our swift reactions to international reporting requirements, and our genuine efforts to combat financial crime. They are tasked to attempt to separate Virgin Islanders from our optimism, our pride, and our determination to excel. What a task indeed. Moderator, my attentive audience, erudite judges, and even our esteemed colleagues are more certain than ever that the changing global economic landscape will not necessarily harm financial services in the Virgin Islands.
The young people are really bringing it tonight. This is very, very serious business. I now call on the opposition first speaker, Ms. Kimia Millington, to present its rebuttal.
Don't be befuddled by the acts, regulations, blacklisting, and agreements thrown at you by the proposition. Moderator, we looked closely at this moot and discovered that underneath the terminology specific to financial services industry, underneath the mind-boggling statistics is one burning question. What are the Virgin Islands? If our house is on fire, will we sit and cry and watch it burn? Or will we extinguish the fire, rebuild and improve our house, install a sprinkler system, purchase fire-retardant furnishings, make it even better than before? Just as the fire can be seen at first to have a negative impact, so too can the stresses of the changing global economic landscape. But in the long run, what really matters is that the changing positive results are undeniable. The Virgin Islands Financial Services House in the long run is positively impacted by external pressure. We will emerge strong. The second speaker of the proposition talked about mice running through cheese. But then, didn't the mice find their cheese? Life is not easy, but we will find our way. When the second speaker said that the BVI is on France's blacklist, we must understand that change is not always immediately perceived. We may be on that particular blacklist, but we have now completed the requirement to be removed. Jersey has been removed from the list, and so was Bermuda. With diligence and patience, we will be removed from that list. We can depend on our shining reputation as an IFC, and we can continue to cooperate by being members of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force and by signing Memorandum for Understanding Cooperation Arrangements with the IU, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act with the U.S. and Tax Information Exchange Agreements. The proposition noted that it was costly to make regulations. In this global recession and economic hard times, the Virgin Islands, like other jurisdictions, need to look within and explore various ways out of hardship. But we know that financial services has already been proven to have given us a relatively high standard of living. So these fluctuations should be seen as a way to see the cracks in our financial services industry and to repair the problems so that we become a better IFC and in turn a better territory. The BVI represents 10% of the total world hedge fund market. Leaving this industry to be damaged and forgotten would then cause a major collapse in the global financial markets. Although it may be a small percentage, it still plays a vital role in the functioning of the global market. For it has been said that the little things always have the biggest impacts. The importance of our financial services industry can be underscored. In this regard, the government of the day and the opposition of the day have also worked together to ensure this sector remains sustainable and prosperous. Kitarama sang, can't keep you down when you're iron strong. The Virgin Islands remains iron strong. We have emerged as a financial services jurisdiction with an attractive reputation. In the face of economic crisis, we lead the way in international cooperation, regulatory reform, and technological financial innovation. We may be in the midst of drastic changes in the global economic landscape, but we can't and we won't let that negatively impact our financial services. We will remain iron strong.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, the opposition's presentation can aptly be described as curry favoring. Nothing more than curry favoring. Don't let them fool you. We all know that financial services is a fragile industry, which is highly vulnerable to economic shocks. The changing global economic landscape will negatively impact financial services in the Virgin Islands. The opposition has painted a bright picture. I would have you believe that our Financial Services Commission is so strong and so proactive that they can withstand any gale force winds. Ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you, when the global financial crisis occurred between 2007 and 2008, the effects were felt right here. Some of our local businesses closed and people were laid off. The second of the opposition said, that the Financial Services Commission is working hard and is taking the necessary steps to cooperate and keep the jurisdiction attractive, clean, and prosperous. Ladies and gentlemen, our Financial Services Commission is being bombarded with wide-ranging initiatives against offshore centers from multilateral organizations, including the OECD, the IMF, the G7 Financial Action Task Force, and the FATCA, just to name a few. Mr. Moderator, our industry has been facing what has been referred to as rapid, complex, constant change, RCCC, and this has brought about a high degree of uncertainty about the industry, which will result in the making of questionable decisions under pressure. Mr. Moderator, the pressure is too great. The opposition would have us believe that the FSC is doing everything to avoid our country from becoming blacklisted. Mr. Moderator, blacklisting or the threat of blacklisting can adversely affect the Virgin Islands. The BVI Beacon of Thursday, February 12, 2015, carried an article which informed us that the United Kingdom's opposition leader, Ed Miliband, said that if the Labour Party wins the UK elections on May 7, 2015, each overseas territory will have 6 months to create a public central registry. Mr. Miliband went on to say that if the deadline was not met, he would ask the OECD to put them on their tax haven blacklist. Mr. Moderator, countries on a blacklist are those regarded as not compliant with international standards, and significant action is required for such jurisdictions to graduate from the black to the gray to the white list. Mr. Moderator, as we speak, our country is blacklisted by France. Our government is still struggling with having the French remove us from their blacklist. Blacklisting is bad for a country's reputation. The opposition would have us believe that the Virgin Islands has successfully invested in strengthening trade in South America and other key regions. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not growth. This is an act of desperation, a struggle to survive in the face of mounting pressure. Ladies and gentlemen, international financial centers like the Virgin Islands play a central role in the global financial system. They are facing a range of challenges linked to economic downturns, increased global regulatory measures, reputational issues, demands for increased tax revenues, and more transparency. These challenges cannot be easily overcome. The pressure is too great. The evidence is clear. The changing global economic landscape will undoubtedly negatively impact financial services in the Virgin Islands. Thank you.
The young people this evening brought their A game to the debate. And you can especially tell from the rebuttals, because the rebuttals are spontaneous. And I've never heard rebuttals like this throughout the entire, 2 or 3 years that I've been moderating the debates. I've never heard rebuttals presented in this way. So we gotta big up the kids.
Thank you to all of the excellent debaters this evening. I just want to commend you all for an excellent job overall. The hard work for each of you, I'm sure the rest of your teams as well as your teachers was evident and clear, and so commendations all around. If we think about overall speaking, and from a debate perspective, there's content, delivery, and language that we feel are important. Content, I think, is going to go most to the overall debate evaluation from our head judge. But from the speaker perspective, we just want to commend you all for the organization of your speeches, or the organization of your arguments. 2 different styles with respect to the debates, but both I thought were very effective. From a delivery perspective, there are just a few notes that we'd want to give as you consider what you might do as you proceed in your debating careers. One just is to contemplate what voice modulation is and could be. There's a lot of power in the notion of pitch, in the notion of tone. There's a lot of power in the way you speak and the approach to pace and pausing. There's a lot that you can do to bring together all the emotion that you might have around a topic, as well as the subtlety of an actual argument, an actual point. We saw a little bit of variation in that. We want to commend those who used it very effectively. We also want to commend the people who thought through how emotion connects to the facts and figures of the debate. So we saw some elegant use of metaphors. We saw words used as a good vehicle to connect to audiences, to bring a bit of emotion into the facts and figures of what is really a fairly financial and regulatory discussion. There were different levels of comfort at the lectern. We considered body language. Some folks had very excellent hand gestures and seemed to be quite comfortable. Others, we'd ask you to just loosen up a touch and see where you might be able to feel your way through the words you're delivering. But every single person up here, every single one, showed extreme command of their material, showed very, 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 very few, and I'm repeating myself to be very, very, very clear, very few grammatical errors. The command of English, we thought, from every single debater on this stage was excellent. We thought that it was better than most of the debates that any of us had seen as judges. And we want to commend you all, even for recovering very elegantly when there might have been a stumble here and there. All of that was done really, really flawlessly and very commendably. So in sum, just to announce who we considered to be the overall best speaker from the debaters present, we thought that Jada Angus from the Elmer Stout High School was the winner of that.
Tonight I want to echo the sentiments expressed by Ms. Swap and indeed all of the adjudicators. The students tonight did an excellent job. Financial services is not a topic always easily understood by the public, and one of the things that I thought would be helpful for all the presenters, all the debaters, and in your future, when you're presenting or debating a topic and you use acronyms, be careful, because while I may know what they mean, others may not. And so if you want to engage that audience with the understanding, just a point to take away, just be a little careful with your acronyms. But again, an excellent job. I'll go through each of the debaters and some key highlights that I saw tonight, what I liked, and areas that I think will strengthen you in your future, because I don't think this should be your last debating experience. The leader for the proposition, Ms. Christopher, I smiled tonight. I heard a lot of the managing director of the BVI Financial Services Commission in your quotes, and it was clear that you did your research. The local context was also very helpful, but based on the moot, it would have been useful to have a little more global referencing on the impact of that global economic environment, but you did an excellent job. Ms. Hodge, your verbal signposts were excellent. I have the points right here. 1, declining revenues due to blacklisting. 2, outsourcing. By giving visual signposts in terms of the points that you're going to make, you carry the audience with you, and that was an excellent use of strategy in your debating. For the opposition, Ms. Millington, you did an excellent job in research, evidenced by your numerous references. You are powerful in your delivery. One word of caution: do not let that power overrun your delivery or your points. Ms. Angus, I loved your reference to the lightweight boxer. It gave a very useful visual, and one that is often used by our regional and international colleagues within the financial services industry and amongst regulators. It is something that the BVI is admired for. And as well as your delivery, you're being awarded the best speaker for tonight. I think that you did an excellent job. Thank you. Now, most important to the debate, and why one team will win tonight, and why one team, while doing an excellent job, may not have won, is convincing the audience of your position. And based on our aggregate views, we are of the view that the Elmer Stout High School did an excellent job and won the debate. As is with the protocol, the points that were awarded to each school, Brigado Flax, you should not be disappointed tonight. You did an excellent job, and you gave the Elmer Stout High School a run for their money with 380 points. However, you were just outpaced a little bit by the Elmore Stout High School with 402.5 points. And let me just close by saying in our deliberation at the back, we were all very impressed with the level of knowledge, expertise, and research. And if it is to the moot, Mr. Eduenka, if it is to the moot, I feel confident that the future of the BVI financial services industry is in good hands if this is the future we're looking at. Thank you for giving us such an excellent evening.
Thank you.